The bulleteer receive a call. Dad, come get me. He has no children, but the voice stops him cold. Jack Thompson was used to controlling everything. The market, the media, the world. But when his phone rang from an unknown number, he almost didn't pick up. Then a boy's voice shattered his reality. Hi Dad, can you come pick me up from school? Jack didn't have a son. Not officially, but the name the boy said next was a name Jack had buried 6 years ago. Emily. The call that changed everything. New York City never slept, but Jack Thompson did rarely and never deeply. At 30 he had already conquered the impossible. CEO of Thompson Global Chapter 01. The boy on the red bench holdings. A name whispered in boardrooms, feared in courtrooms, and printed in every financial magazine. His office on the 76th floor of a glass tower piercing the Manhattan skyline overlooked the entire city. A fortress of silence, steel, and self-control. He liked it that way. Power was predictable, profits were measurable, people were messy. And Jack had learned long ago at a cost. He never discussed that control was safer. That's why he didn't notice the sunset that evening, bleeding orange across the mirrored buildings like fire across a battlefield. He was too busy reviewing merger contracts, scrawling notes in precise surgical handwriting. His scotch sat untouched. The world could fall apart outside, but in here, nothing was ever out of place until his phone rang. An unknown number, half-round. His spam, a mistake, a journalist. He almost declined the call. Almost. Instead, something, intuition, fate, or maybe just exhaustion kept making him sweat. Jack Thompson, he answered briskly. What came next? Showered thermal around his life in 4 quiet words. Hi, Dad. Can you come pick me up from school? For a moment, Jack couldn't breathe. The glass of whiskey slipped from his hand, shattering on the marble floor. The voice wasn't robotic. It wasn't staged. It was a child. A boy, soft-spoken, real. His fingers clenched the phone tighter. Who is this? I'm Noah Fine. Jack's brain did the math before his heart could catch up. My teacher, Miss Sarah, Hildy Cole. My mom, Emily. She didn't pick me up. She's sick. That name was a ghost from another life. A name that tasted like Paris summers and rain-soaked goodbyes. A name he hadn't dared say aloud in 6 years. Emma. He stood there for a moment, frozen, the word echoing through the silence of his penthouse. And in that silence, something inside him cracked. Noah gave him the name of the school. Jack was already grabbing his keys before the call ended. He didn't ask questions. He didn't call security. He didn't think. For the first time in a decade, Jack Thompson abandoned control. Because if what the boy said was true, if Emily was sick, if this child was his, then nothing else mattered. Not the contracts, not because not even the empire he built from cold steel and sleepless nights. He was a fab, and he was already 6 years late. Chapter 1. The boy on the red bench. The elementary school wasn't the kind of place Jack Thompson usually found himself. It was more tucked between a laundromat and a bakery in a quiet Queens neighborhood where the trees were too old and the sidewalks cracked with stories. The Bentley looked like a spaceship as it pulled to the curb, gleaming black, foreign. Jack stepped out, still in his tailored suit, but for the first time in his adult life, he felt underdressed, unprepared. He scanned the playground. There, a red bench, half. Chapter 02. The voice that cracked his world faded, peeling paint. On it sat a boy, small, solemn, legs swinging, a Spider-Man backpack clutched to his side like a shield. Next to him stood a young woman, likely the teacher. Her hand rested protectively on the boy's shoulder. Jack's breath caught. The child had his eyes. That exact cobalt blue and the same unruly brown hair he himself had wrestled with in every yearbook photo. But it wasn't just their it was something else. The loneliness in his posture, the silence that had mirrored something Jack had buried long ago. As Jack walked toward them, his steps faltered. What was he even supposed to say? Hi, I'm the stranger who never knew you existed. But then the boy looked up. Doubt. The word hit him like a bullet through glass. Jack dropped to one knee, not out of strategy, not out of instinct, but because his legs simply gave out beneath the weight of that voice. Noah, the boy nodded. Uncertain. His fingers tightened around the strap of his backpack. And then, without a second thought, he stood and wrapped his arms around Jack's neck. The world fell away. There was no city, no past, no noise, just a small body trembling in his arms and the slow, quiet realization that this moment was real. I have a son, Emily never told me. Mr. Thompson, the teacher asked gently, pulling him back to the moment. I'm Miss Sarah. We've been waiting with Noah since 3:15. His mum, Emily, was rushed to the hospital this morning. She told the neighbor to find your business card. It was in a locked drawer. Noah insisted on calling you himself. Jack swallowed hard. She hit Memorial Hospital, 5th floor, oncology. The word echoed like a gun showed in his chest. Miss Sarah handed over a file with emergency contact papers, trembling a little herself. Do you want to take him? Jack hesitated, but only for a second. Yes, he said. Yes, he's coming with me. He lifted Noah into his arms, surprised by how natural it felt. How right. In the car, Noah pressed his face to the window, silent. Jack tried to think of what to say, how to explain the unexplainable, but the only thing that came out was, I am here now. Okay. The boy nodded, eyes wide and they drove in silence past the flashing lights of Manhattan, past skyscrapers and strangers, and in Jack's chest, the storm grew louder. Emily, this summer in Paris, your laugh over espresso, the way she fiddled with the emerald pendant around, the way she disappeared without a trace, breaking his heart in a way he'd never admitted to himself. Now everything made sense. Her vanishing, her Silas was pregnant and she had chosen to walk away rather than let her son be swallowed by Jack's world, by his family, by the cold legacy of the Thompsons. Could she hide this from me? But deep beneath the anger was something. If he had tried harder, would he have found her in time? At the hospital, he gripped Noah's hand as they stepped into the elevator. 5th floor oncology. The numbers lit up like a countdown. When they reached the room, a nurse nodded and motioned toward a corner suite. Jack froze in the doorway. Emily was lying there, still pale, unrecognizable. Her once vibrant face was drawn, her hair gone beneath a scarf, her eyes closed. But even now, she Chapter 03, the hospital room and the woman he lost, looked beautiful and fragile. Noah tugged his hand. Can I go to her? Who drape? The boy tiptoed to the bed, climbed up gently, and nestled against their side. Mum, he whispered. Emily stirred, her lashes fluttered open, and a gaze locked onto Noah's, onto the slowly. UNU. Jack's tears slipped down her cheek. Jackie breathed. He stepped forward, one hand gripping the bed rail like it was the only thing keeping him standing. Well, you told me. Her hand moved to Noah. She stroked it slowly, as if every movement cost her strength. Not now. Note in front of him. Jack said nothing. He sat beside the bed, overwhelmed by the million pieces of a life he didn't know he had. A woman he once loved, maybe still loved. The empire he built now felt like ashes in his mouth. Later that night, back in his penthouse, Jack stood by the window with Noah asleep on the couch behind him, clutching a dinosaur plush toy he refused to let go of. Jack stared out at the glittering skyline and whispered the question aloud to no one. What do I do now? There was no answer, only silence. Only the beginning of a story he had never expected. But maybe, just maybe, he was the one he was meant to live. That the woman he lost, the true he never knew. The next morning, Jack Thompson sat at the kitchen counter of his immaculate penthouse, staring at a cup of untouched black coffee. Noah was still asleep in the guest room, wrapped in a mountain of pillows and blankets, his Spider-Man plush tucked under his chin. Jack had checked on him 3 times already, each time expecting the boy to vanish, as if this were some fever dream he would wake from. But it wasn't. The toothbrush on the bathroom sink was real. The crayon drawing of a dinosaur Noah had made in the hospital waiting room was real. The look on Emily's face when she saw him, that was painfully, unmistakably real. Jack pressed his palms to his face. How did I miss all of it? He had searched for Emily. At least that's what he told himself after she disappeared 6 years. He'd made a few calls, hired a private investigator for a month. But when nothing came back, when even her number went dead, he'd convinced himself she had left by choice. She chose her, I chose mine. But now, sitting here with the truth unraveling around him, Jack realized that wasn't entirely true. He hadn't just let her go. He'd burn it up. He'd buried the pain, the questions, the memories deep under the relentless pace of deals and deadlines. And now all of it was clawing its way back. A doorbell broke his thoughts. He opened it to find Linda Roberts, Emily's mother. She stood rigid in the hallway, her gray ice harp beneath a face aged not by years, but by disappointment. You have a lot of nerves, she said without even a greeting. Linda, Jack began, but she pushed past him into the apartment. He looked around, lavish as expected. Pity it couldn't buy you a spine. He closed the door, jaw tightening. I didn't know, Linda, I swear it. Emily never told me. She didn't tell you because your parents made sure she wouldn't. Jack froze. Belinda turned to face him, her voice brittle with years of bitterness. Your mother offered Emily money to disappear. Your father threatened to pull her scholarship, and when she didn't take their offer, they made her life hell. Jack stared at her, stunned. No, he whispered. They wouldn't. They did. And when she found out she was pregnant, she made the only choice she thought she had. Her voice, to protect your child from your world. A silence fell between them, heavy, inevitable. Jack looked down, his thoughts racing. They never told me, he said finally. Not once. Linda didn't answer. Shouldn't have to. The silence spoke enough. She's dying, Jack said quietly. They said, maybe a month. Linda's hard edges softened. And she didn't want pity. Not from you. Not from you. I don't pity her, Jack snapped. I want to fix this. Linda shook her head. Some things can't be fixed, Jack. But maybe if you're lucky, they can be forgiven. Later that day, Jack sat at Emily's. Her breathing was shallow, but her eyes were open. He handed her a cup of ice water and watched her hand tremble as she sat. You always hated hospitals, he murmured. Emily gave a faint smile. Still do. He pulled the chair closer. He stared at the ceiling for a... Chapter 04. A child who needed a father. Long moment before speaking. Because I was scared too of me. No, she said softly. Boo. Jack knew who she meant. I didn't think you'd believe me, she continued. And I didn't want our son growing up being treated like a mistake. Jack clenched his jaw. He's not No, Emily said, tears slipping from the corners of her eyes. He's everything I've ever done right. Silence settled between them. Jack reached into his coat and pulled out a worn photograph, one he'd kept tucked in his wallet for years. It was of Emily standing on a bridge in Paris, laughing, the wind in her hair. I kept this, he said, placing it beside her on the pillow. Even after you were gone. She turned her hair, eyes misting. I used to dream you'd show up one day, she whispered. But I never thought it would be like this. Jack reached for her hand. Let me help. Let me make up for the time I lost. Emily closed her eyes. And first that night, Jack stood at the edge of Noah's bed. The boy was already asleep, breathing evenly, his tiny frame rising and falling under the blanket. Jack sat beside him, unsure what to say. Your long pause, he whispered. Your mum is the bravest person I know. Noah stirred but didn't wake. And you, Jack's voice broke slightly. You're the best thing that ever happened to me, even if I didn't know it until now. Noah's little hand reached out and his Jack stayed like that for a long time, staring out the window at the city below. The empire he'd built suddenly felt small because now he had Summer Thingriator to protect, and the woman he'd never stopped loving, even if he was on the brink of losing her forever. Number 3. The child who changed everything. Jack had never eaten cereal before noon in his life. He'd never stepped barefoot on a kitchen floor sticky with spilled juice. Never knelt beside a child brushing tiny teeth with a dinosaur-shaped toothbrush. Never had to explain why broccoli was not optional. But by Tuesday morning, all up that had changed because Noah was changing everything. And Jack didn't know who he was without his ironclad routine anymore. You put too much milk, Noah said, peering into the cereal bowl with a frown. It's just milk, Jack replied, bemused. No, it's too much, the boy said with the authority of someone who had survived 5 full years of. Jack exhaled, adjusted the spoon, and made a mental note. Less milk next time. This was fatherhood, he realized. Not the heroic slow-motion montage from movies, but a series of tiny, unglamorous moments that carved new corners into your heart without warning. Later that morning, they visited M. Noah brought a handmade card and a single daisy he had picked from a park planter on the walkover. Jack had offered to buy a bouquet, but Noah had shaken his head solemnly. She likes real things, he'd said. The word stuck with Jack, but when they entered the hospital room, Emily was sitting up, pale but lucid. Her eyes brightened when she saw them. Mom. Noah ran to her bedside and climbed up gently. Emily wrapped her arms around him, breathing him in like he was the only oxygen in the room. Jack stood at the foot of the bed, watching. There was a quiet grace in how she touched her son's hair, how she smiled through the fatigue, how she somehow made a sterile hospital room feel like home just by existing inside it. You brought me a flower, Emily asked, voice barely above a whisper. Noah nodded. It's a daisy. Not fancy, but it's real. Jack saw it then, a flicker of emotion in her eyes. That small reminder that Noah was hers in every way that mattered, and yet his too. Emily reached out, and for the first time in years, their fingers brushed. Thank you, she whispered to Jack. Your wife was showing up. The days that followed didn't get easier. Jack moved heaven and earth to secure Emily's treatment. He hired top oncologists, booked second chapter 05. The letter she never sent. Opinions, even offered to fund an experimental protocol being tested in Europe. But Emily refused anything that would take her away from Noah. This might be all the time I have, she told him one night. I'm not spending it on a plane chasing miracles. He needs memories, not promises. So Jack did the only thing heckled. He made her days beautiful. He brought music to her room. He printed photographs of Noah's birthdays, ones he hadn't been there for, but honored anyway. He found old books they used Tolov and read aloud from her favorites. And when she was too tired to speak, he just held her hand. At home, Jack found himself changing. He traded Wall Street briefings for bedtime stories. Conference calls gave way to glue-stick craft disasters, and school drop-offs in a car still dusted with glitter from an art project. Gone rogue, Margaret, his longtime assistant, almost had a heart attack when she saw a crayon drawing taped to the inside of his briefcase. "You're evolving," she remarked, barely masking her surprise. "I'm unraveling," he replied dryly. But the truth was, hadn't mind it. I'm not, or because every day Noah surprised him with his questions, his empathy, his strange wonderful logic. "Why do you always wear suits?" he asked. One evening, swinging his legs from the kitchen stool. "Because I go to work." "Ah," Jack replied. "But I go to school," Noah countered. "And I don't wear a suit." Jack chuckled, "Genuinized you in." The next morning, he wore jeans. A week later, after a particularly long day of meetings, Jack came home to find Noah asleep on the couch, clutching his dinosaur again. But something else lay beside him this time. Asterisk. If gold bent at the corners, it was of Emily holding a baby wrapped in a blue blanket. Sunlight pouring through a Paris window. Jack stared at it, breath caught in his throat. He hadn't had been told, but Emily had kept that moment and he frozen it in time. In color, in proof. "You were always meant to be his father," the photos seemed to whisper. He knelt beside the couch, smoothing Noah's hair. "I'm sorry I missed so much," he whispered. "But I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere." The next morning, Jack took Noah to school. The teacher gave him a look he recognized. Curious, cautious, but kind. First day drop-off. "She first everything," Jack said with a tight smile. Noah hugged him without being asked, then ran off toward other kids. Jack stood there for a while, longer than he probably should have, watching the boy he never knew. The boy who looked just like him. The boy who somehow, because the truth was, Jack hadn't really been living until that call. He hadn't existed. Yes, he had achieved, but he hadn't felt, and now he did, every messy, terrifying, beautiful second of it. That night, he returned to the hospital. Emily was asleep, but Annis motioned for him to wait. He sat in the chair beside her bed, watching the rise and fall of her chest. She looked so small in that bed, so different from the girl he'd met in a Paris cafe 6 years ago, and yet still her, still the woman Woe had loved deeply enough to raise their son alone. Still the woman who had given him the only thing he had ever truly needed. He leaned forward and whispered into the quiet. "You were right, oh, protect him." In a pause, then softer, "But I'm here now, let me protect Yobeth." And in that moment he realized something he hadn't dared to feel in years. Hope for the past. She hid the family. He must confront it. Had been 10 days since Jack Thompson received that life-altering call. In days since his world shifted from boardrooms to bedtime stories it taken. He walked back into Emily Miller's life and realized how much of it he had missed. And on the 10th day, he made a decision that he chapter 06, the goodbye that wasn't goodbye went home, but to the penthouse, not to the polished, impersonal empire he built on Wall Street. No, he drove to the Stone Estate in Greenwich, where he was raised, the place where the Thompson legacy was built and polished and protected at all costs. His childhood home, the one Placide had avoided since the day Emily disappeared. As the gates opened and the gravel crunched under the tires of Hisker, Jack felt something twist in his chest. This was the place that had broken her. It was finally ready to face. The foyer hadn't changed. Still cold, still immaculate, still filled with the faint scent of money and silence. His mother, Victoria Thompson, descended the stairs with the same graceful disapproval that had haunted every woman Jack ever loved. "Jack," she said, lips pursed. "You didn't say you were coming." "I wasn't sure I'd be welcome," he replied. "You're always welcome," she said. But words rang hollow. He didn't bother with small talk. "You know, Vic," he stared at her, fury simmering beneath his composure, "that Emily was pregnant, that she was carrying my child when she left for Paris." The flicker, the faintest thesis. "If she did, you know, Victoria, you paid her to leave. She would have ruined you," she said quietly. "You were on the brink of taking over the company. Your father—"
Jack stepped forward, his voice sharp as ice. "You stole 6 years of my son's life from me." Victoria faltered, the perfect mask cracking. "Dun dun." "I didn't know she kept the baby," she whispered. "That's your defense," Jack snapped. "You interfered in my life, drove her away, and when she vanished you didn't look. You just assumed she'd disappeared quietly and left your conscience clean." He looked away. Jack's voice softened, but the tremor remained. His name is Noah. He's 5. He has my eyes. He sleeps with a dinosaur plush, and he thinks his mom hung the moon. Victoria sat on the bench near the fireplace, her hands trembling. I was trying to protect you, she said at last. No, Jack replied. You were protecting a name, a legacy, and you destroyed everything real in the process. He turned to leave. Jack, his mother called softly. Where is she now? The hospital. Late-stage lymphoma. She didn't tell me because she was afraid you'd find out. Victoria didn't respond. Jack didn't wait. Back in Manhattan, Jack stared out the hospital window while Emily slept. He hadn't told her yet that he confronted his mother, not because he was hiding it, but because part of him was afraid it wouldn't matter, that too much damage had already been done. He glanced down at the paper in his hand. A DNA confirmation, not that he needed it. Every time Noah looked at him, he saw the truth reflected back. But it wasn't about proof anymore. It was about ownership, not of a company, not of a name, but of responsibility, of love, of lost time. He was going to be on that birth certificate. He was going to be the legal guardian, when Emily couldn't be. The thought made him nauseous. Just then there was a quiet knock at the door. Linda stepped in. I heard you went to see them, she said. Jack nodded. Did they admit it? He lowered himself into the chair beside him. Emily never wanted you to know. I figured. He said if you knew about the past, you'd never forgive them, and if you forgave them, she'd never forgive herself. Jack looked at Emily's sleeping form, pale and fragile under the soft white sheets. I don't care about their forgiveness anymore, he said. I just want to make this right. Linda studied him for a moment, then nodded. You're not the boy you used to be. Did he ever wanted to be? Later that night, her voice was barely audible. You told them? Jack nodded yes. Emily turned her head away, sighed. I'm not angry at you, he said gently, but I needed to face it. Tears slipped down his cheeks. I tried to protect you from them, she whispered, but I think I broke something in the process. Jack reached for her hand. Then let's fix it. Not for them, for Noah. He looked at him, eyes raised, searching for some reason to believe him. I can't give him much longer, she said, but maybe you can give him more. And he swallowed. He leaned down, pressing his forehead gently to hers. I swear on the life you gave me, the one I didn't know I was missing until he said that one word. Dad. Emily let out a soft sob, clinging to his hand like it was the only thing tethering her to this world. And maybe for now, Katuta was. In the days that followed, Jack began filing for full guardianship of Noah. He hired child therapists. He adjusted his entire company schedule. He stepped down from 3 boards. He even canceled a corporate retreat in the Maldives, something his team had to see to believe. But the biggest shift wasn't external. It was the way he showed up.
For Noah, every morning, every bedtime, every school drop-off, every dinosaur drawing stuck to his stainless steel refrigerator. Jack Thompson, once the coldest man on Wall Street, was now being called Dad by the only person whose approval ever truly mattered. And for the first time in his life, he felt worthy of it.
Chapter 5. The Custody Papers and the Dinosaur King. The documents were thicker than expected. 7 pages of legal terms, background checks, affidavits, court references, and parental rights. Jack had signed mergers worth billions with less paperwork, but none of those contracts had ever made his hands tremble the way this one did. Because this wasn't just a deal. It was a promise. A declaration to the world, and to one little boy, that he wasn't going anywhere. Jack sat at the long conference table of his private attorney's office, the city skyline glittering behind him, though he barely saw it. His focus was on one page. Petition for full custody of Noah Miller. D.O. His pen hovered for a moment, then pressed down. Jack Edward Thompson. A single line, but it split his life in 2. From the men he'd been before the phone call. to the father he was now becoming. "Why are you wearing that face?" Noah asked that evening, eyes squinting up from the floor where he lay surrounded by plastic dinosaurs. Jack blinked. "What face?" "The one," Noah said, pointing. "The one where your eyebrows go like this." He scrunched his forehead dramatically. Jack let out a soft laugh, startled by how disarming this boy could be. "I guess I'm just thinking," he said, sitting cross-legged on the floor beside him. Noah picked up a blue Triceratops. "Did you mess up at work?" "Not this time." "Did someone yell at you?" Jack shook his head. "What?" He hesitated, then leaned closer. "I signed something today, something that says, I get to be your dad for real." Noah blinked. "You weren't my dad before." "It was," Jack said quietly. "But this makes it official. It means I get to take care of you if your mom needs help." The boy was silent for a moment, processing. "Are you going to stop being my dad later?" The question hit Jack like a punch to the ribs. "No," he said immediately. "Never." Noah studied him, serious and small. Then he picked up a green Tyrannosaurus and placed it in Jack's hand. Okay, he said, "then you can be the dinosaur king." Jack chuckled. The dinosaur king. He's in charge of all the dinosaurs. He protects them and tells them bedtime stories. And makes sure they have snacks." "Well," Jack said, "that sounds like a big job." Noah nodded solemnly. "You'll need a crowd." Later that night, Jack stood at the edge of Noah's bed, watching the boy sleep beneath a soft comforter decorated with stars and moons. The apartment had changed. His once minimalist penthouse now bore the soft chaos of childhood. Scattered toys, spilled juice, construction paper taped to the walls. And in the middle of it all, a small human who had somehow become his entire universe. He turned off the light. "Good night, buddy." From the bed, a sleepy voice murmured, "Good night, Dad." Meanwhile, at Memorial Hospital, Emily was awake. Her body was tired, bones aching with every movement, but her mind was sharp. Linda sat beside her, knitting quietly. "Did he sign them?" Emily asked. Linda looked up. "He did." A long breath escaped her. She wasn't relieved exactly. The fear was still there, of letting go, of trusting someone who had once vanished from her life without knowing the truth. But she had seen the way Jack looked at Noah, heard the way the boy spoke about him. And deep down, she knew. Noah had found his father, and Jack had found something deeper than control or success. He had found purpose. Emily looked down at the folded letter beside her bed, the one she'd written in case things didn't go well. It was addressed to Noah. She still hadn't decided whether to give it to him. Maybe she wouldn't need to. Maybe she'd live long enough to tell him everything herself. 2 days later, Jack took Noah to a child therapist for their first joint session. The office was warm, filled with soft chairs and shelves lined with toys. Dr. Clara Patel, a calm woman in her 40s with kind eyes, sat across from them. "Noah," he said, "do you know why you're here today?" The boy nodded and took all. "What kind of stuff?" He shrugged. "Mom being sick and moving in with Dad." Jack's heart clenched. The Patels smiled. "That's a lot of big feelings, and it's okay to have them all at once." Noah thought for a moment. "Sometimes I'm happy, but sometimes I'm scared." "What scares you most?" Noah looked down. Silence filled the room. Jack reached out and placed his hand over Noah's small one. "She's fighting really hard, but..." "I know," the boy said quietly. "But sometimes people fight, and still lose." Topple gave Jack a look, gentle but instructive. She was right, this wasn't a moment to correct. It was a moment to hold. Jack cleared his throat. "Whatever happens, you won't be alone, I promise." That evening, as they drove home, Noah was quiet in the back seat. "Can we do something fun tonight?" he asked suddenly. "Sure," Jack said. "What do you want to do?" Noah thought, "Make a crown for the dinosaur king." Jack grinned. "All right, but only if you help." "We'll make it green," Noah said seriously, "because that's your favorite color." Jack didn't correct him. It wasn't. But maybe now, it was. Back at the apartment, they cut paper, taped Jules' sticky stickers and crafted a misshapen but glorious crown. Jack wore it all evening, even during a Zoom meeting with his CFO. It didn't care. Because Noah was laughing. And for the first time in his life, Jack didn't need to impress anyone. He just needed to be there. Later that night, a nurse at Memorial handed Emily a sealed envelope. "From Jack," she said. Inside was a photo. Jack and Noah on the couch, both wearing paper crowns, smiling the same crooked smile, laughter frozen in time. Below it, note: "He made a kingdom, you're still our queen." Emily stared at the photo for a long time, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. Because this was what she had once dreamed of. And though it had come late, and painfully, it had come. Chapter 6. The letter she never sent. The letter was old. The paper creased. The ink slightly faded, as if the weight of its words had soaked into the fibers. It sat inside a small wooden box, tucked between hospital bracelets, Noah's first ultrasound printout, and a photograph taken in the summer of 2019. Jack had almost missed it. He found the box while cleaning out a drawer beside Emily's hospital bed. She was asleep, her body curled slightly toward the window as rain tapped gently on the glass. He wasn't trying to pry. He had only meant to organize, to make things easier for her. But when he saw his name written in Emily's handwriting on the envelope, "Jack, in case I never get to tell you," he froze. It wasn't dated. It wasn't sealed. Waiting for the moment she never got to have. He didn't read it at first. He carried it home in his coat pocket, its presence pressing against his chest like a heartbeat he couldn't ignore. After Noah fell asleep that night, curled beside his T-Rex plush, crown slightly askew, Jack sat alone in the living room. The city outside was quiet, wrapped in fog. He unfolded the letter with trembling hands. And he read, "If you're holding this, then it means I never got to say what I should have said a long time ago. Maybe I was afraid. Maybe I was too proud. Or maybe I just didn't believe you'd want to hear it. But I need to tell you everything. The day I found out I was pregnant, I sat on the cold tile floor of my apartment in Paris and cried. Not because I was scared of the baby, but because I didn't know what to do about you. I had just watched your mother walk into my cafe, place a check on the counter, and tell me I was ruining your life. She told me you had a future, an empire. She said I'd always be the girl who didn't belong, that if I stayed, I'd turn you into someone your family could no longer respect. And when I didn't take the check, your father made good on every threat. I lost my visa. I lost my job. I nearly lost myself. But I never lost our child. He was the one thing I never doubted. I loved him from the moment I felt the first flutter, and I loved you, even when it hurt. I told myself I was protecting Noah by keeping him from you, that if he never met you, he could never be rejected, that he wouldn't become some bargaining chip in a war between families. But the truth? I think I just didn't believe I was enough. I used to picture what would happen if you showed up one day, if you found us. Would you be angry? Would you take him away? Would you look at me and see the girl you once loved or the mistake your parents warned you about? And now, if this letter has found you, then I suppose you've met him. Jack. He's everything good in the world. He has your eyes, your curiosity, your stubbornness. He builds Lego cities and says words like fierce and invincible. You would be so proud. And if you've chosen to stay, then maybe you are the man I once believed in. I hope you are. Because the only thing I've ever wanted for Noah is to be safe, to be seen, and to be loved by someone who doesn't walk away when things get hard. If you've become that man, then you don't need my forgiveness. You already have my heart. And if you're reading this because I'm gone, tell him I never stopped loving him. Till he was never a secret. He was my reason. Emily. Jack sat still for a long time after the last word. Tears slipped silently down his cheeks, falling onto the worn paper. He had built billion-dollar ventures. He had faced down boardrooms, billionaires, journalists. But he had never faced this. A truth too heavy for headlines. A love letter never spoken aloud. A woman who gave him a son would... He folded the letter carefully, placing it back in the envelope. Then he walked down the hallway barefoot and quiet into Noah's room. The boy stirred as Jack knelt beside the bed. "Dad?" he mumbled sleepily. Jack kissed his forehead. "I just wanted to check on you." "You okay?" Noah asked, yawning. Jack nodded, though his throat was tight. "Yeah, buddy, I just wanted to tell you something." "What?" "Your mother..." Jack paused, blinking back tears. "She's the bravest person I've ever known." Noah nodded. "I know. She fights like a T-Rex." Jack smiled. "Yeah, just like that." The next morning, Jack brought the letter back to the hospital. Emily was awake, sitting by the window with a blanket draped over her knees. The sunlight made her look translucent, like she was fading too fast. He handed her the letter without a word. Her face paled when she saw it. "You read it," she said softly. "I didn't." Emily looked away. "I never meant to keep it from you. I just..." Jack knelt in front of her, gently cupping her hand. "You gave me a son," he whispered. "And you protected him. Protected me in your own way." Her eyes welled. "I didn't know if you'd hate me." "I don't," Jack said. "I could never." He kissed her knuckles, and for a moment neither of them spoke. Then Emily asked, "Do you think he'll forgive me if I don't get to explain all this in person?" Jack shook his head. "No," he said gently, "because he won't need to." Emily's eyes searched his. "Because I'll tell him everything," Jack promised. "Exactly how you wrote it, exactly how he should hear it." Emily exhaled, a sob escaping her lips as she pressed her forehead to his. "Thank you," she whispered, "for staying." Jack pulled her into his arms, holding her carefully, reverently, as if she might disappear at any second. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. And for the first time since Paris, she believed him. Chapter 7. The goodbye that wasn't goodbye. The hospital smelled like rain and antiseptic. Outside, the sky had turned a bruised gray, and thunder rumbled in the distance like a warning. Jack stood in the hallway outside Emily's room. The day was supposed to be the day. The one they had all quietly dreaded. Emily's vitals had dipped dangerously low overnight. Her oxygen levels had dropped. Her skin had turned ghost pale, and when the morning rounds came, even Dr. Chen's gentle smile had faltered. "She's slipping," the doctor had said. "If there's anything that needs to be said, now's the time." Yep. Jack closed his eyes. He had faced down death before, in business, in battlefields, at boardrooms. But this wasn't strategy or survival. This was something he couldn't fix, something slipping through his fingers like sand, no matter how tightly he held on. Inside the room, Emily lay small beneath the thin white sheet, her lips slightly parted, her breathing shallow. Noah sat beside her in a tiny armchair, holding her hand. He was too still, too quiet. "Can she still hear us?" he asked Jack softly, not taking his eyes off her. Jack nodded, kneeling beside him. "They say people can hear us even when they can't talk." Noah leaned closer. "Then I'm going to keep talking." And he did. He told Emily about his dinosaur fort, about how he'd learned to tie his shoes, about the silly story Dad made up about a T-Rex who ran a lemonade stand. Jack sat beside them, not speaking, just watching. The two people he loved most in the world, locked in a moment he couldn't bear to interrupt. Time moved slowly. Nurses came and went in hushed steps. And then at 4:27 p.m. the monitor let out a long, shrill beep. Jack stood up in a panic. "No, no." The nurse rushed in, followed by Dr. Chen. Noah stared at the screen, silent and confused. "Mom," he said, "why is it making that sound?" The team moved quickly. Oxygen, paddles, medication. Controlled chaos. Jack pulled Noah away gently, shielding him. "It's okay, buddy, let them help." Noah's voice cracked. "Is she going away?" "I don't know," Jack said, voice shaking, "but we're here. We're not leaving her." Miraculously, the long chunk, a flicker, a heartbeat. The flat line broke into uneven spikes. Evelyn froze. "He's back," the nurse whispered. The Chen exhaled. "She's back." Jack sank to his knees, unable to breathe. Noah clutched his hand with wide, terrified eyes. "I thought she was gone," he whispered. Jack held him tightly. "So did I." Emily was moved to ICU, stable but critical. He didn't wake up that night, or the next, but her vitals held. Jack never left the hospital. He slept in a chair by the window. Noah curled up beside him in a blanket nest built by the nurses. It wasn't the end, but it had been close enough to change. On the third morning, Emily stirred. Her eyes fluttered open slowly. Jack was asleep, his head resting near her hand. She moved her fingers slightly, brushing his cheek. His eyes snapped open. He stared at her for a long second, then exhaled in a shudder. "You came back," he whispered, as if afraid to say it too loudly. Emily blinked. Her voice was barely a breath. "Wasn't ready to leave." Tears filled his eyes. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Words felt too fragile. Finally, she looked around. "Where's Noah?" "Downstairs." "Draw a bit well. Get well, dinosaur." He smiled weakly. "Always dinosaurs." "Your legacy," Jack said, smiling through tears. Then he leaned in, and for the first time since Paris, since heartbreak and silence and 6 years of separation, he kissed her. Gently, slowly, like a promise. Emily's eyes closed again, but this time not from exhaustion. This doubt, or peace. 2 days later, Emily sat upright in her bed, looking stronger than she had in weeks. The sunlight from the window kissed her skin, and Noah sat beside her, feeding her grapes like she was royalty. Jack watched from the door. Linda stood beside him. "She's not out of the woods," Linda said, "but the doctors are hopeful. They're even talking about letting her try the treatment again, with time, real time." Jack nodded. "We'll give her all of it." Linda looked up at him, eyes softening. "You already have." That night, Jack tucked Noah into bed at home. The boy looked up at him, serious. "She almost left, didn't she?" Jack sat beside him. "Yeah, but she didn't." Jack thought for a long time before answering. "Because she heard your voice, and it pulled her back." Noah was quiet. "Do people always come back if you love them enough?" Jack hesitated. "Not always, but sometimes love is the thing that makes them try." Noah nodded. Then he said something that made Jack's throat close up. "I think you pulled her back too." In the days that followed, Emily improved slowly. She was still fragile, still walking a tightrope between risk and recovery, but the shift was undeniable. Her body was healing. Her heart was already home. "A photo," she said, "from the summer in Paris. I left it in that box, the one with the letter he brought to her that night. And with it a small red velvet box." "Jack," she said, startled, "what is this?" He set it in her hand. "I know you're still healing. I know we have miles to walk, but life doesn't wait for perfect timing." We opened it. Inside was a simple ring, not gaudy, not flashy, just gold and quiet. "I don't want a wedding," he said, "not now, not yet. But when you're ready, I want to build a life, one we choose, one Noah can grow up in, with pancakes and dinosaurs and chaos." Emily stared at him, her eyes shimmering. "And love," he added, "the kind that doesn't go away even when we almost do." He was silent for a long moment. Then she whispered, "It's not a goodbye." Jack shook his head. "No, it never was." He took his hand, placed the box on the nightstand, and leaned into him. "Then let's begin again." To 8, a place called home. The first time Emily walked back into the world, it was on trembling legs and borrowed strength. Jack held her hand the entire way. It had been 3 weeks since her near-death moment, since the flatline, since the goodbye that didn't quite happen. Now she stood outside Memorial Hospital for the first time in nearly 2 months, her hair shorter, her body thinner, but her spirit undeniably alive. The spring air greeted her like an old friend. The breeze was cool and smelled faintly of rain and magnolias. Birds chirped somewhere above, and yellow taxis honked in the distance. "You want to go straight home?" Jack asked, watching him. Emily looked up at him, then at the black town car waiting at the curb. She shook her head. "No," she said. "I want to walk for a minute." Jack didn't argue. They took it slow, one block at a time. Noah skipped ahead, swinging his Spider-Man backpack and talking to his plush dinosaur as if it were a tour guide. Emily's steps were careful, her lungs still reacclimating to the world outside the sterile air of the ICU. But every step mattered. Every step whispered, "You made it." Jack's apartment had changed since she'd last seen it. Gone were the sterile whites and sharp lines. Now the space breathed, soft crayons, scattered crayons, blankets left mid-floor, and a fridge door decorated in lopsided stars and stick-figure families. Emily stopped in the doorway, her eyes glassing over. "This doesn't look like you," she said softly. Jack grinned. "It's not just mine anymore." He helped her to the couch while Noah ran into his room to get his welcome home card, which featured a very muscular T-Rex holding flowers. Emily traced her fingers over the stitching of a pillow shaped like a cloud. "This place. It used to feel like glass. Now it feels like—" Jack sat beside her. "We're trying." Over the next few days, the apartment found its new rhythm. Emily needed rest. Noah needed structure. Jack needed patience, something he was still learning in real time. He rescheduled meetings. He held Zoom calls from the kitchen while flipping grilled cheese sandwiches, skipped orange juice on a shareholder report, and didn't even swear. Emily watched him one afternoon as he paced the living room in socked feet, discussing a development proposal while gently brushing Noah's hair. "You're different," she said after he hung up. Jack turned. "Different? Before he ran your life like a machine, now it feels like a family." Jack didn't respond right away. Then he said, "I think I was waiting for something to matter more than winning." He smiled. "You found it?" He glanced at Noah, who was coloring dinosaurs under a blanket fort. "Yeah," he whispered. Later that night, Emily and Jack stood on the rooftop, wrapped in a blanket beneath a pale moon. "I don't know how to say this without sounding dramatic," she murmured, "but I didn't think I'd ever be up here again." "You don't have to say anything," Jack replied. "I want you." She looked at the skyline. "When I left Paris, I wasn't just scared of your parents. I was scared of you, not who you were, but who I might become trying to fit into your world." He turned to her, brow furrowed. "You never needed to fit in. I know that now, but I didn't then." She looked at him. "I wanted to give Noah a peaceful life, and somehow, even though it hurt, I think I did." Jack stepped closer. "I'm sorry for what they did, for what I didn't know, for not finding you sooner." Emily touched his face. "You found us exactly when we needed you." Then she asked a question she hadn't dared ask before. "Do you ever resent me?" Jack shook his head. "No, but sometimes I resent all the time we lost." He nodded. "Me too." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded slip of paper. "Then maybe it's time to stop losing time." Emily unfolded it. It was a deed to a brownstone in Brooklyn. A warm, ivy-covered one with wide windows and a backyard. "There's space for a garden," Jack said softly. "For Noah. For you. For us." Emily looked up, stunned. "Are you asking me to move in?" "I'm asking if you'll help make it home." She was quiet for a long moment. Then she smiled. "Let's plant lavender." 1 month later. The house smelled like paint and cinnamon. Noah had insisted on a green bedroom with glow-in-the-dark stars, and a bookshelf shaped like a volcano. Emily chose pale blue walls for the kitchen and filled it with thrifted mugs and herbs in tiny pots. Jack, of course, insisted on installing smart home features, but stopped short when Noah told him Alexa talked too much. The garden came last. Together they dug the soil. Noah wore dinosaur rain boots and planted lava flowers, marigolds. Emily chose lavender and daisies. Jack planted rosemary for luck. We should name the garden, Noah said, wiping dirt on his cheeks. Jack asked. Because it's ours. Things that matter should have names. Emily thought for a second, then she smiled. Let's call it Second Chance. Noah blinked. Why? Because that's what it feels like. That night, under soft string lights and the buzz of cicadas, they sat on the porch steps. Jack wrapped an arm around Emily's shoulders. Noah lay across their laps, sleepy from planting. You know, Emily murmured, this isn't the life I imagined when I was 21, broke and scared. Jack smiled. Me neither, but I'd pick this one every time. He looked at him, eyes up. This is a place I never thought I'd belong. You don't just belong here, he said, brushing a kiss to her temple. You built it. She leaned against him. And under a sky full of stars and second chances, they let the past be the past. Because finally, after years of pain, silence, and almost goodbyes, they had found a place called home. Chapter 9, The Storm Before the Vows. It was supposed to be the beginning of forever. The invitations hadn't gone out, but the florist had been booked. Emily's dress was tucked in the back of the closet. Unworn, untouched, but undeniably hers. Noah had already picked out his outfit. A blue blazer and a clip-on tie with tiny dinosaurs on it. Because weddings should be brave, he'd said, like T-Rex. Everything was moving forward. Until the phone call came. Jack answered it on a Tuesday morning, expecting a logistics update for the garden ceremony. Instead, it was his father. I assume you haven't completely lost your mind, Richard Thompson's voice drawled. Jack's body went cold. Excuse me. Marrying her, Jack? That waitress who disappeared with your child and reappeared with hospital bills and a sob story? You're willing to throw your name, your company, your future away for her? Jack stared out the window, fists clenching. She's the mother of my son, he said slowly. She's the woman I love. Richard's voice sharpened. She's a liability. Jack's silence burned. And what about Noah? His father added, venom creeping in. What happens when your enemies get wind of this? When your shareholders realize your heir is half street rat and raised by a woman who... Jack hung up. For a long moment the phone just sat in his hand like a weapon. His heart thudded violently in his chest. The fury came in slow waves, ice cold, then blistering hot. He had expected resistance, but not like this. Not after everything. Emily was in the kitchen when he returned home, humming as she made tea. The light hit her hair in that soft, golden way he loved, and for a second he just stood there, wishing the world could leave them alone. Hey, she said with a smile. Everything okay? He posed. Her smile faltered. He told me word from word. From his father's accusations to the veiled threat about Noah. By the end, I knew they wouldn't accept me, she whispered, trying to keep her voice steady. But I didn't think they'd use him. They don't get to touch him, Jack said, fierce. They don't get to touch us. But they still have power, she murmured. And you still have a company tied to their name. Jack stepped closer. Do you think I care about that more than I care about you? He looked up, and for the first time in weeks he saw fear in her eyes. Not the fear of dying, but the fear of costing him everything. I just don't want to be the reason you lose what you've built. He touched her face, gently. What I've built means nothing if you're not there to share it. She shook her head. Then say it, he challenged. If you don't want to marry me, say it. But don't make this about them. Tears welled in her eyes. I do want to marry you. Nothing else matters. He didn't respond right away. Instead, she reached into the drawer beside the sink, pulled out a folded paper, old, torn at the corners. What is that? Jack asked. Emily placed it on the table. It's the NDA I signed 6 years ago, the one your parents gave me when I was pregnant. They made me promise never to speak about the baby, never to come near you. Jack stared at the paper like it was poison. You kept this? I kept everything, she said quietly, because I always knew one day the truth would come back. He picked up the document. His father's signature stared back at him, bold and unapologetic. Jack's jaw clenched. I'm done playing by their rules. The next morning, Jack, a real one. He stood before the board of Thompson Global Holdings, every executive and investor seated in polished suits under blinding lights. I'm stepping down as CEO, he said, voice calm, unwavering. The room erupted at it. You what? Someone gasped. You're abandoning your legacy? Another shouted. Jack raised a hand. I'm not abandoning anything. I'm building something better. Something built on truth, not bloodlines and intimidation. Is this about that woman? One of the board members scoffed. No, Jack said, eyes narrowing. This is about the boy who calls me Dad. He pulled out the NDA and laid it flat on the table. This is what my family used to erase my child from my life. This is what they gave a 22-year-old woman in a foreign country after they paid for her silence and nearly destroyed her future. So no one moved. No one. Let the press see it, Jack said. Let them know exactly who the Thompsons are, and then let them see what we build next. Emily stood frozen in the doorway of the brownstone when Jack came home. You did it, she whispered. Did. What happens now? He smiled. We get married, we raise our son, and we build something that has our name on it. He walked toward him slowly, tears already falling. But your legacy. He took her hand and pressed it to his chest. This is my legacy now. That night, thunder rolled across Brooklyn again, but this time, it didn't scare anyone. Noah built a fort in the living room with blankets and pillows. Jack read from a dinosaur book while Emily braided her hair in the corner, watching the two most important people in her life laugh under soft yellow lights. When the lights flickered from the storm, Noah whispered, "Don't worry, T-Rex isn't scared." And Emily realized neither was she, because no matter what storm raged outside, inside, they had each other. And that was the vow they had already kept. The wedding they chose. There was no aisle, no white carpet, no flower wall curated by a high-end designer from Milan. Instead, there was sunlight, warm and golden, slipping through the leaves of the garden Jack, Emily, and Noah had built with their bare hands. Lavender bloomed along the fence line. Daisies swayed softly in the breeze. A string of paper dinosaurs hung from the pergola, color drawn by Noah, colored with crayons and pinned with clothespins. And at the center of it all, beneath a homemade arch wrapped in ivy and twinkle lights, stood the woman Jack never stopped loving, in a pale blue dress she'd stitched herself during her quietest days of recovery. This isn't a wedding, he whispered with a soft smile as Jack reached for her hands. No, Jack replied. It's a promise. There were only 12 people present, friends who had become family, and family who had finally chosen love over legacy. Even Victoria Thompson came. She hadn't said a word when Jack sent her the old NDA back in the mail, torn clean down the center. But she showed up today, not in judgment, not in pearls, in silence, holding a small bouquet of lavender, tears on her lashes, and guilt in her eyes. Jack had told her she didn't have to come, but Emily had told him gently that sometimes healing starts with simply showing up. Noah stood between them, his tiny blazer wrinkled, his tie slightly crooked, holding the rings on a silver saucer from the kitchen drawer. Do I say something now? He whispered to the officiant, who smiled and nodded. Noah cleared his throat, standing a little taller. I think love is when someone remembers the way you like your cereal, even if it's weird, he said seriously, and when they never leave, even when you get sick or scared or mess stuff up. He looked up at his parents. And I think this is going to be the best wedding ever, because we're already a family. We're just putting a crown on it. Everyone laughed softly. Emily's hands trembled in Jack's, but her voice was steady when she said her vows. I never imagined this moment, she said, not when I found out I was pregnant, not when I raised our son in borrowed apartments, and whispered stories about a father he'd never met. Jack's eyes filled. But now I realize, maybe I didn't need to imagine it. Because some things don't need to be perfect to be true. She paused, breath catch. You came back for us, not to rescue but to belong. And I choose you, Jack, not because of your name, not because of what you've built, but because of the man you became when everything else was stripped away. Jack's fingers tightened around his and then they up. I didn't fall in love with you again, Emily, he said softly, because I never stopped. You gave me a son, and in him I saw all the things I'd never earned. Kindness, joy, laughter. You gave me a second chance, when I didn't deserve it. He reached up, brushing a tear from her cheek. And I vow this, to never let a day pass where you or Noah question how much you matter. To wake up grateful, to raise our son with courage and softness, to never walk away from the hard and from the truth, and definitely not from us. The crowd was silent. Even the breeze seemed to pause. Then Noah grinned. You guys can kiss now. He laughed. He did. It wasn't a dramatic kiss, not something made for magazine covers or viral clips. It was earned. It was love that had suffered and healed and stayed. That night, in the garden under string lights and laughter, they didn't toss a bouquet. They planted a tree. A small dogwood just past sapling stage, its roots wrapped in burlap and hope. Emily pressed her fingers into the soil. It'll outlive us. Jack covered her hand with his. So will what we built. Noah placed a dinosaur figuron at the base, for protection. The guests clapped. And someone said softly, this is the kind of love the world needs more of. As the sky deepened into stars, and soft music played through an old speaker, Jack twirled Emily slowly on the grass. No shoes, no pressure. Just the woman who survived him. And the men who came back from his own silence. I used to think I needed to prove myself, Jack said, pulling her close. To my father, the world. Even to you. You don't, she whispered, not anymore. He looked down, kissed her forehead. Because you already proved the one thing that matters, she added. What's that? That you stayed. Inside the house, above the fireplace, sat a framed drawing from Noah. A house, a garden, 3 stick figures holding hands. Above them a banner. A family, forever. Even when we're inclusion, the morning after forever. The house was quiet. Not the lonely kind of quiet Jack had once known in his penthouse, but the soft, lived-in quiet of a family asleep after a day filled with joy. He padded barefoot across the hallway, stepping over a plastic dinosaur, and paused at Noah's door. Inside, his son lay tangled in blankets, arms wrapped around his ever-present plush. The paper crown from the ceremony sat on the bedside table. Across the hall, Emily slept curled in the patch of moonlight spilling through the window, the faintest smile still on her lips. Jack didn't disturb. Instead, he walked out to the garden. The wind stirred the lavender. The young dogwood stood tall, silent but sure, roots just beginning to claim the earth. He knelt beside it, brushing dirt from the stone marker they'd placed that evening. He read, for all the second chances we never thought we'd get. Jack sat for a while, the night around him soft and sacred. And he thought about everything they'd lost. Everything quickly they almost missed. And he, by some grace, love doesn't always arrive on time. Sometimes it shows up late, scared and broken, but when it chooses to stay, but after the storms. After the storm, it becomes the kind of love that builds gardens. Where pain used to live. True love doesn't need perfect timing. It just needed the courage to begin again. 1 year ago, the brownstone was louder now. Noah had started first grade. His backpack was covered in dinosaur stickers, and his first homework assignment hung proudly on the fridge. Emily worked part-time again, editing children's books from the sunroom, her health improving more each month. And Jack, he never returned to the boardroom. Instead, he built something new, a foundation for single mothers navigating medical hardship. He called it the Emily Project. A Wednesday they had pancake dinners. Every Sunday they planted something new in the garden. The dogwood had grown, its branches strong, reaching upward like hope made visible. Noah often watered it and whispered secrets to its bark. One morning he asked Jack, "Do you think trees remember who planted them?" Jack smiled. "I think they remember everything that matters. Just like families do. Just like love does." If this story brought tears to your eyes, share it with someone who once believed they'd never be worthy of love again. Because sometimes, the only thing we need is someone who sees our heart, even when we can't see it ourselves.